So, hello everyone. I guess it's just one student today, but it's fine. So, today is the last lecture, and we already had our extra session before. So, this is the last time we'll be meeting. If you have any, so finally, week 8, and your exam is, I guess, in April or something like that. So, if you have any further questions till the exam, you're feel free to add your questions in the Q&A discussion forum of the code of NPTL, or else you can also mail me. My email ID is jagruti.p@iitgm.ac.in. Okay, so these two ways you can add in your questions if you have further doubts related to the questions or to the course or exam related problems, any such of that. Okay. So let's begin with my introduction, of course. I'm Jagriti. I'm a fourth year student at IIT Gandhinagar. I'm working on quantitative ultrasound for tissue characterization. So for this week, we have something about how to represent a data set. So last time we looked into few basic like statistical estimators for a data set, and we saw that okay, there were like mean, median, mean, standard deviation, and those ones through which we can simply represent a data set like numbers, multiple numbers we can represent as a single number, and that single number has a tendency it can represent or the distribution of the data or how the data will vary. Those things we can get from those estimators. Okay, so today we'll look at those first, and then after that, like, and these are like simple estimators. We call it as a first order estimators or statistical measures to measure the tendency of your distribution or the data that you're looking at. But when we say this distribution, how do we plot this or how do you represent this number? So of course you can write something as like a range of them, min max of them, but at points like if you plot it, it's like more than enough. Like it's like people say that visualization is much more better. When you see things with eye, you trust it. So that's why we plot it. And how we plot it is called as probability density or probability distribution function. So we'll see those functions also. One such which the prof has introduced in class is about binomial distribution, which says about if something is yes or no, so distribute the function in a way if it has only two values. Answer to the question can be yes or no, one or zero, true or false, something like that. So it follows a binary pattern, hence the name binomial distribution. Okay. And then we'll see how the distribution is being defined. After that, we have normal distribution. So normal distribution is like one of the standard distributions. Like previously, we saw Gaussian function. So that Gaussian is also an approximate for this normal distribution, something which is symmetric around y-axis, and it has zero mean and single standard deviation. If it increases, decreases, there are different distributions to it. And then how do you measure the tendency for it? Then you have different scores for it. So let's say you have Z score, you have T score. So using those scores, you can see that from which particular limit to another limit, the your probability is being changed. Now, if the probability is being changed or not, then following it, you have something which is called as hypothesis testing. If something is changing, is the change statistically similar or is the change statistically significant? So these are like words you should never use very casually. Statistically similar is not a keyword, but statistically significant, statistically different are two keywords. Okay, which essentially mean the same thing, but you shouldn't use them whenever you're like mentioning some things where you're directly saying these are different things. So never ever mention statistics there if you have not yet applied statistics to. So first, to do so, you need to have some hypothesis testing. When you do those hypothesis testing, you define some critical thresholds, some values. Based on that, you'll get to know that if it's different or not. However, for the scope of this course, prof hasn't limited us, like he has given very limited first order knowledge into it. So we'll also go till that point. If you're further interested into this part of statistics, like if you further do more data analysis and you have more experiments being done, you generate more data. So after that point, you can look at a course that is called as biostatistics, or else you can also look at something as data analytics methods. So when you do analytics, in analytics also you have the statistical method. So you can also get an idea from there. And then after that, he has taught something about probability density functions. So how do you estimate one when you see the data? But for that, he has given very random information like for diffusion equation. So we'll see how it goes. And that's all I have for today. I've added more of images so that it becomes more intuitive. And then after that, we'll do assignment questions. Okay. Of course, you have the book reference now. So these are like the measures of central tendency, and what that is. So, central tendency is stated as the statistical measure which represents a single value of the entire distribution or data set that we just said now. The measure of that is a single value that attempts to describe the entire data set by identifying the central position within that set of data. Now, the central position can be any, your mean, median, or mode, any position. Now, what are the measures of central tendency? Those are like mean, median, and mode. How do you compute mean? Mean is nothing but sum of values by total number of values that you have. Can also be represented as x bar right here. So it is nothing but sum of values. So each ith index value, let's say I goes from 1 to n till by n. So total number of values that you have over there. So essentially sum of all data number of values by the total number of data that you have. Then you have something called as median. Now median is nothing but the centermost values that you have in your data set, right? So for odd numbers, it follows as n by 2. Sorry, for even numbers, it follows as n by 2th term. So let's say if you have like 10 numbers in your data set being given, arrange them in ascending order. When you arrange them in ascending order, then you take the nth, so far the fifth term, and you take the sixth term, you average that term. So that's your median for that particular data set that you have. So median is directly dependent on the number of terms you have. If it's odd, it's n plus 1 by 2th term. Okay, and the last one is mode. So mode is the highest frequency term. So here you see something which is called as frequency. What is frequency is how many times a number appeared in its distribution. So that's like maximum frequency represents the mode of it. Let's say if you have a distribution, something as you have 1 to I won't write it as okay. Let's say you have 1, 2, again 3, 4, 5, 1. So in this case, the maximum frequency for the number, which number is higher. So we see that 1 is being repeated again and again. So the mode for this data set is 1. Okay. So that's all. Mode is all about it. Right. It's not letting me erase. Okay. When we're done with that, so this is how you see. So if you have a normal distribution, something which is symmetrical around your y-axis, at that point, your mean, median, mode all coincide each other. So they all overlap at a point because it's symmetric in other cases. Here also it's similar and here also it's similar, right? So in this case, your mean, median, mode are same. But when your data is, let's say, left skewed. Now in this case, skew is something where the data, your distribution has a tendency to bend. Okay. So in this case, your skewness is towards left side. No, sorry. Okay, so skew is this part. The tail part of your data is something that they're calling here as that it is skewed at. Okay. So this part, your tail where it is being changed. So that's skewed. But in other cases, when people also represent how I have read that this is a left skewed data set, whereas this is a right skewed data set like that. But it's fine. Either cases, it's fine. So if you see, the average would lie somewhere in between, it's like around where most of the data set is being lying around, whereas your mode would be the highest, the peak of your data distribution that you're looking at, whereas the median would be in between it. So median will always be in between mean and mode, because mode, it's like it will always take the peak. Average would be somewhere which represents the entire data set. Hence, the median would be in between both of them because it is nothing but dependent on the number of samples that you have. Okay. Uh, yeah, so before that, then there's also a tendency measure. So it does not belong to the central tendency, but it is part of data variation. So that is nothing but standard deviation. Okay. And how do you represent standard deviation is nothing but how much your original value has a variance, or how I'll say, not a variance, that's again a different term. Let's say how your original number, let's say your xith number, deviate from your average number. So that represents your standard deviation. Okay. So standard for standard deviation to understand, you'll have to first know about variance. And variance is nothing but again how it varies from the average number that you have. So variance is computed something as 1 by n minus 1 summation I is equals to 1 to n. Take all of your indices one by one and subtract it from average and square it. So that is your variance. Now, when you take the square root of your variance, that gives you your standard deviation. It can either be represented as an S or as an sigma. Okay, both ways you can represent your standard deviation as. So that's all about these two. Now, anytime wondered that why it is n minus 1, because whenever we do average, it's always n, it's not n minus 1. Why so? Any guesses?
Is it because we're not taking the mean value? Consider.
No. So, if you see here, Uh, so mean is nothing but it's something different. Right? It does not accumulate, sorry, it does not count the number of data points that you have, right? So here we are writing n minus 1 because, so let's say if I have this 5 numbers, okay? I take average of this 5 numbers that I have. So once taken an average of it, if I divide it by 5, it would be the indexing for it goes as 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I have this many numbers. Whenever the mean calculates, this is zeroth index 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's not that, okay, the last one is the fourth index, that's why I'll do n minus 1. That is because this term is something which we call it as degree of freedom. Okay, degree of freedom. And this degree of freedom tells us that whatever numbers you get, if you divide it by n minus 1, if you change the order of this number from here to here or here to here or somewhere here and here, your average will remain the same. Okay, that's why you always take n minus 1 here. So that's a degree of freedom for the data set. That's why it's always n minus 1 for all statistics. Either the term in the denominator would be n minus 1 for standard deviation. In this case, when you know about it, when your sample size, you have an idea where two different data set, let's say if you're A and if you're looking at B and both have same data set. Now in this case, they are same, both have same sample size. In case it does not have same, so if NA is not equals to NB, then you do something called as pooled standard deviation. Okay. So in case of pooled standard deviation, you do something as NA minus 1 times standard deviation whole square NB minus 1 SB whole square. I'll tell you that please go and see the formula for it. Don't trust the formula that I'm writing. I'm writing from my own memory. So have a look for it, but it's something like this. So here also it accounts for the deviation. So both of the terms, I'll add both of them and subtract one from it. So this is nothing but just to preserve the order of the distribution or the data sets that I'm having in there. Okay. That is something I wanted to share. And then after that, we have the statistical distributions. Okay. So here you have something called as a continuous distribution. A continuous distribution is something which is measuring from your data set is being measured from something. Whereas your discrete is nothing but it's dependent on a variable, and that variable can accept some different discrete values, separate values, it can accept those. Whereas this is being taking values from a continuous finite data set. Whereas in this case, it is totally dependent on this random variable and it can assume clearly separated values. Okay, so in case also here also you see, so this is continuous, not because it is, you see it as smoothened curve, but this is like at all points, you will have some value being defined. Whereas in this case, you won't have a value being defined at 1.5. You won't have a value being defined at 0.5. The value is only defined at 1, and that is nothing but the frequency for this one. So how much is the probability when my X is 1? Like that. Okay. So following it, you have like, so here we were only reading about continuous probability distributions because for this discrete probability distributions, Prof only explained us how to compute probability. And that is like just take your frequency and sorry, yeah, just take your frequency and divide it by the sum of all frequencies. That's why you get this particular metric that how many are in this one thing. So this thing is something in like proper terms, you call it as bin. Okay, so that is, and then how many bins you have in a data, how many bins do you have or do you represent a distribution with? So number of bins and the bin width is something which is dependent on your data. Okay. And if you change it or if you manually add it, then your distribution also changes. So this is again distribution dependent. So howsoever you change it, now the more the number of beans, the smoother the data set will look like. So let's say if I was to divide this distribution discretely, so if I add more smaller beans, the data set would look more smoother and smoother. Whereas if I add some discrete beans right here, so I'll add one, then I'll add two, then I'll add three. So I'll only get some information about what's been getting through it. If there are more, it's better. But again, those cases, if you increase after a point where it shouldn't be, then it would be something called as overfitting. If it's not to the point where it's not fitting, it is something as underfitting. And there are criterias for the same, that how should you take it? Like you should take it from the edge, minimum of the data set to the maximum of the data set, and those criteria that are there, which follows like particular probability law. So if at all you need, you can have a look into it. So that is how discrete distributions are, and that's where we left for it. So this is nothing but something part of normalization, right? Why so? Because the value will only lie in between 0 and 1. Maximum value would always be 1. And in this case, it's always finite. Finite and positive. Okay, it can never be negative. And what we are seeing over here is like of the entire population. Here also. In the other case also. This is the population that we are looking at. Okay, and this population in not in statistics, but in signal processing, for this population, you can also call them as ensembles. Right? Now, these ensembles are something which have same features. So in this case, if you have to compare it with biology, it can be similar size, similar shape of cells, similar conditions that they were grown, all those conditions you can look at. So these are like some ensembles. Here we call them as ensembles, but it is nothing but your population that you're looking at. Okay. Yes. Following it, so that's our probability distribution function. And for any random variable x, you can represent the probability distribution function as this. So this is like you integrate it. So it's essentially nothing but your area under the curve. Okay. And if you have to compute the probability density function for it, so if you are writing a probability, so it can be a derivative for it. Now, if you are evaluating it between two particular limits, it can be like add some limits to it. So for now, you know definite integrals, right? But every time we have this condition, that it is always finite and it is one, either you evaluate it from negative infinity to infinity. So that's like basic rule for probability, that the area under the curve always remains as one, given that you have normalized it. Normalized it, and it represents a density function. What is density function? The function that we just looked at this. So what we are, so it's nothing but essentially mapping all the points, as a function of the this random variable against with which we are plotting it at. Okay. That's continuous probability for distribution. That's how you represent the PDF of it. So here in this case, so there are two things. One is like probability density function. One is like your cumulative distribution function. So here, if you see, this is your probability density function, whereas the other hand, this is like cumulative distribution function. So this is like only defined at certain points, whereas this is nothing but for all points. So in this case, if you see this probability density function, and we already saw that this at limits is always equals to 1 f of x d of x. So if you say f of x, this is nothing but equals to 1 by x, like if you just see it intuitively. So the units for this PDF is always 1 over length. Okay, so this always varies with respect to length. So howsoever it would be, the dimension for it would be 1. And considering it, there were like different functions. So we'll see those functions later. Okay. Following it, we have like binomial distribution. I don't know why this is so faded, but okay. Now for binomial distribution, it's nothing but what I told you previously. So if you have a distribution, and if you are told to ask a question which has like answers to, let's say yes or no, let's say 1 or 0, true or false, like or not, something like that. Something which is like, uh, if it's going or if it's not going. So very true, very true. Very wrong, very wrong. It's like that. Okay. Alive or dead, like that. So either ways, you're just asking a question which will eventually have two answers. Okay. And then here we'll compute that how many, let's say how many yes I'm getting, how many no I'm getting. So that's nothing but likelihood of getting a favorable outcome that you're looking at, something that you get exactly. So that's a favorable outcome in your case. So here the probability binomial distribution, it describes the probability of exactly having this K success in n independent. So Bernoulli trials or something, don't forget about it, with probability of success is P. So in class, Prof came up with a term that was called as B. So if you just look at here, he gave something as B power K, and he gave right 1 by B power n minus K. Right? It was something that he gave, and he said that B is the bias that you represent. Okay. In either cases, if this bias is true, okay, so bias is favorable, it is something that you want it to hold. So this bias in that cases, you can represent it as P, which represents the probability of getting a success. Okay, so that's how in maths and stats people also represent it. If the bias is unfavorable or it's 1 minus B, you represent it as Q. So that's nothing but, so it's up to you. This is some lingo, just probability of failure. Okay. So that way you have like two different terms you will never get confused with. And this is something as combination. So you choose from given n, you choose that how many times the favorable outcome that you wanted came in your data set. Okay. So the combination for that, how you write it as factorial of the first one by factorial of second one by differences of both of them. So this is how you take factorials there. Okay. And then we had some similar examples that, okay, if you talk, so everything that we're talking now is something unbiased. So if you toss a coin which is unbiased, you'll have equal chances of being getting positive and negative, right? So a tail and a head. So that would be half in that case. Then you can also compute the mean and standard deviation for this distribution. If you need to compute mean, the mean is lying around NP. So that is nothing but in this case, it can be NB, what it was taught in class, or it can also be, you can write it as summation of the probabilities of all true by probabilities of the term which is being true. Okay, you can either ways, you can write NP, NB, or this one. Okay, all three like true cases. Standard deviation is nothing but this is square root of NPQ and variance is NPQ. Okay, how we studied it in class was something as n, b, and then 1 minus b, right? Square root of all of them. So that's how we studied in class, following classes terminology. Okay. Uh, yes. And then there was something I wanted to show. Okay, let's find its normal distribution there. So yeah, so for this binomial distribution, since the value is always like 0 and 1, so there's like people came up with thresholds. So either it's like higher than 0.5, lesser than 0.5, greater than 0.2, lesser than 0.2. So it always varies. So then in either cases, you have like different distributions. Okay, something like this one. And then they came up with that this would be something which is less than 0.5. So your data would be skewed towards the left-hand side. Here it's exactly 0.5, so it is symmetrical. And here it's again skewed, so it is like greater than 0.5, hence it's lying towards that point. Okay, so that's how they represent it. So this is like the other cases are like bias distributions. This one, where this is your standard binomial unbiased distribution. Okay, let me know if you have any questions at any point. Okay. Then after that, we have normal distribution. So normal distribution is something just a part of Gaussian distribution and just what we saw now. So normal distribution also has like a formula which is based off on Gaussian. And here it is like if you just plot it, it represents how the values are varying from the mean. So if it's like a standard normal distribution, it would have zero mean. Okay, and it would have a standard deviation of 1. So in this case, if you see this is 0 mean and standard deviation of 1. So this is your standard normal distribution that you're looking at. What all of these numbers represent and why it is -1, -2, -3, I'll tell you when we look at it. Okay. And then in this case, so how do you represent the data? if you have, let's say, data, and then from that particular data, you're computing its mean, you're computing its standard deviation. Okay. When you write it, let's say you're writing in reports or you're writing a manuscript or something like that. Whenever you're doing that, you write something as that my data had variations from mean plus minus standard deviation and your unit here. Okay. That's how you represent your data set. So that means that entire of your distribution or the values of your data, values which have in your data you have, which they would be around this particular like the metric or the term that you're writing inside, the value that you have in there. So it is nothing but ranging from this mean plus minus standard deviation. So that's what I'm representing here. So this is the mean, and how many standard deviation does it vary? Accordingly, I'll have, let's say, if it's varying one standard deviation. Okay, so if it's varying one standard deviation, I'll have like 68.2% right here. Okay. Otherwise, if it's like two standard deviation, then it would be sum of both of them. So 26 or something, 27 something, 0.2, something like that. Those percentages. Again, if it's like higher in those cases, so it would be like 4.2%. Again, it will be. So again. So that's how you represent that how much amount of your data is varying from standard deviation. So from the mean, varying from the mean. Accordingly, with respect to standard deviation, you can compute the percentage of the data that falls within those bounds of standard deviation. Okay. So here, that's how you represent normal density, normal probability density. Either cases, if you look at this curve, from negative infinity to infinity following f of x dx, it would be always unitary. Okay, so that unitary is nothing but area under the curve that we are plotting. And essentially what this is nothing, your probability density function. So whenever I write this, you can either write it as p of x also. Okay, so that's essentially the same thing that you're writing. Now, how do you represent this as? You represent it as probability of x given I know x bar and sigma, can write it as like this. Okay, so that's how you call a function that. Now, in this case, the function, what below was given was this one. So the function always you can write it as like a times exponential of this whole term. So this was essentially x naught or mean of your distribution, what prof also gave. And by 2 sigma square, sigma is your standard deviation right here. Okay, and this is a. This whole term is your a. So in either cases, the a can also so a is always same, but you can either write this as a e minus b as x square if mean is 0, standard deviation is 1, or you can write it as a e minus b and then this minus this whole square. So in that case, your b is what? It is 1 by 2 sigma square. Okay, so either cases, people have their own terminologies to write it. And this essentially follows this one where this is your A. Now, from where does this A, sorry, oh, not where does this A come from, but essentially, if you are looking at some limits, let's say if you add your curve as some limits from A to B where you're trying to evaluate it from, it's every time it would be nothing but the area under the curve that you'll be evaluating it for. Okay, so area under that particular strip that you're looking at. So just integrate the curve for those particular two limits that you know. So what curve is here? This particular curve. So integrate this exponential for those two limits that you'll be looking at. Okay. So here what is being said and why, what we are writing, this probability distribution function, this is the distribution of the value of the variable, but this variable is nothing but mean. Okay, so this normal distribution is nothing but it comes from the central unit, sorry, not unit, central limit theorem. Okay. And this central limit theorem says that if you are representing a data of differences, distribution of the differences in means, then you can, that such type of distribution can be called as normal distribution. Okay. So don't always confuse your data point, each data point X with the mean of the distribution. When you have mean of the distribution and you're essentially trying to differentiate means in between the different data sets, then you can write this as P of X bar. It's essentially P of, then you can define it there. Okay, so that's how you write it. After that, you have something which is called as this full width half maxima. Okay, so either cases, this is what the value they have written, and this is from other distribution, but I just wanted to show you what it represents. So this is like the width of your data that you're looking at is called as sigma. If you twice it off, this is like 2 sigma. And in this case, now here they are writing 2 sigma to here, but just flip this one to here. So similar to how it was. So this would be like sigma. So that's your width of the curve. The maximum at the point where you have, this is nothing but, sorry, at a point is the half width. Whereas when you take at half point, you come here. So this is the full width that you're looking at. So this is full width, whereas half maxima, right? Half maxima. This is again full width and full maxima. But nowhere we write as full width, full maxima. We always represent it as full width, half maxima. So if you want half maxima, for that your amplitude will reduce to half, right? And you originally have your distribution as a times exponential of minus of x minus mu by 2 sigma square, right? When you have these terms, cancel a, you have like 1 by 2 is equals to exponential, oh sorry, exponential will also go. So you have minus x minus mu by 2 sigma square. And now in this case, we know that what is x minus mu? If your x is equals to this, and let's say, sorry, this is x is mu and this is the x bar that we're looking at. So x minus mu is nothing but your half width, right? So x minus mu is the half width that we're looking at. Sorry, this is square. This is square. Okay, the half width that so W be the width of the data set here. So it would be and let's take 2 above. So this is ln2. You'll have a minus sign here that gets cancelled out from this minus sign right here. And this is whole square. So this becomes W square by 4. 4 goes down. So 4 times 2, that is 8 sigma square. Okay, so now if you try and represent the sigma square can be W square by 8 ln 2, right? It is something like this. Now, if you want to write your standard deviation, it would be nothing but W by square root of 8 ln 2. So that's it, the standard deviation you get when you have full width, the maximum width that it can be, and half maximum. Okay. That's how you represent it. And if you don't even remember this, this is fine because this is pretty much easy to remember. The Gaussian formula, how it should be and how Gaussian functions are. Then from there, just do half of its amplitude. You'll get the width of the function that you're representing it at. Okay. Any questions still here? Then we have same thing. Yeah. So what I wanted to show before. So here, if you have this is like data of 0 mean, so you have x is equals to your x bar or x is equals to mu in this particular case. So when it is 0, you have maximum. So the standard deviation is essentially 1 in this case. Now when you represent, so this is nothing but your percent of data and this is the range from the mean. From mean, how much your data can vary. How much it can vary is represented in terms of standard deviation. And this is like percent of data which is lying inside the standard deviation. So in this case, it is 68, then it is 95, then this is this. So this is the probability of the data that will lie inside it. However, these are the numbers which are like 1 minus of the entire data set that you're looking at. Okay. Any questions till this part? Because like we'll be changing gears after it. So it is related to Gaussian distributions, but somehow different from here. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So after that, you have something called as hypothesis testing. And in here, how it should be taught, like I was taught this as like full 4 credit course, and that was like entire span of the semester I had, then also an exam. But here we only have like a 28-minute video perhaps on it, something like that. So this is like, yeah. So let's say I have a hypothesis to test. Okay. And this hypothesis can be that I have a treatment group. Okay. And I have an untreated group. Let's say the treatment is with a drug. Okay. Anything without it. So I want to see, I'm saying that my efficacy will increase in the treatment group than the untreated group. Okay. So whenever I say something like this, so this is something I favor. I want it to happen. Okay. So this is not something which lies in like, it is like always true. This is not something that which is bound to happen. This is what something I want. So whatever things you want in nature, in life, becomes your alternative hypothesis. Okay. And the question opposite to it, it won't happen. This won't be true, this would fall wrong, something like that. That would be your null hypothesis. Okay, so in this case, my null hypothesis would be that efficacy won't increase in the treatment group, whereas my alternative hypothesis would be the question that I'm looking at, that the efficacy would improve in the treatment group. Okay, how people represent this as, this can be your null hypothesis, so it's always H naught, and alternative hypothesis is always HA. Okay, so that's how you represent both of them. Now, to evaluate it for, like, okay, I have written that there are two terms, but how should I compare both of them? In what, with respect to what? I'm looking at them. Okay. So you first define your null and alternative hypothesis. Then you choose a significance level. What is the significance level? The differences of means in between your hypothesis that you're comparing. Because essentially what we're looking at here are probability density functions. And what are those? Those are distribution of the means for the differences of the data. Okay. So here it would be, let's say, mu naught and mu A. Okay. My null hypothesis would be that mu naught is equals to mu A, whereas my alternative hypothesis would be that it is not equals to. But in this case, I'm not looking at equals, right? What I'm looking at, I'm looking that my efficacy won't be here, right? So won't be higher in the treatment group. So it would be mu A would be, oh, sorry, that my mu naught for the treatment group, let's say this treatment group is, or it should have in reverse way so that it's easy. So let's say this is my group BE and this is group A, right? Because untreated comes always first. That's our control. Okay. So our null hypothesis is that the efficacy won't increase, right? So mu A is always higher than mu B. Whereas my alternative hypothesis is that it will increase. So the means would be higher for, let's say, your second group. So mu A is less than mu B. Okay, so that is my hypothesis. So that's how I'll look at my data set. But when I do that, I'll have to consider, this is not itself. So this is just differences in between means that I'm looking at. After differences in mean, I'll have to choose a significance level. To what level, to what extent, which threshold should I take below which I'll say that, okay, this limit works, this limit does not work. So I'll choose a significance level. For that, people always choose a confidence limit of interval of 95%. So that is something in stats. And this 95% corresponds to a significance level, which is represented as alpha as 0.05. In this case, let's keep it as P because you have something else as alpha also here. Okay. So let's say this P. So P is nothing but if my probability is 0.05. So I'll say that if my probability falls below 0.05, I will reject the null hypothesis. So in this case, if my probability falls below 0.05, I am rejecting null hypothesis and accepting the alternative hypothesis. Okay. Then I'll collect and analyze the data and I'll see what it comes as. I'll compute the test statistic. Okay. Now this test statistic is very dependent on the samples of data you have, the number of samples. I guess it's too noisy out there. I'll connect my mic. I don't know what they are doing today. Mm, okay. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, so then we need to compute the test statistic, and this test statistic is like directly dependent on the number of samples you have. And this samples is nothing but if that's so in stats you have a magic number, okay? And this magic number comes from a lot of things. Like there are a couple of power analysis behind it, but to this point, it's fine. When you actually go into statistics and learn about biostats, then you'll get this idea and this things from. So for now, it's fine. So this magic number is 30. Okay. So they say if your data set is like more than 30, the samples are higher than 30. So it's more than enough so that you can represent your data as a normal distribution. Okay. When you don't have more than that, when it's less than 30, it is like it is following a normal distribution, but it's not. So when it's like that, you follow a T distribution. So that's how they say that when it is large and small, but you can't keep it vague, right? You need to assign it with some quantitative values there. Okay, so it's like this. So in this case, your test statistic would be nothing but for if you're looking at normal distribution, the test statistic for it is Z. Okay. And when you look at your T distribution, the test statistic is T, same as that. Okay. Then there are terms to it. So how do you compute Z? You compute Z as you take the mean of your data set that you have, the mean of your null hypothesis from where you are looking at, your standard deviation by square root of n. Okay. Since this is following your normal distribution, they write it as sigma by square root of n. And then for T, they write it as x bar minus mu by S by N. Okay, something like this. Now, this is considering that both of your groups that you're looking at has some sample size. The sample size is not at all changing in those cases. Okay, now when you do this, you compute this test statistics, you look at the probability of them. Okay. And how do you compute this probability is not something of your concern because we cannot compute it. Those are some things which are done like old statisticians and mathematicians. So what they do is like uh, you have something called as Z table. Okay. So you have a table like this. Okay. If you can see, I don't know how to. Can we, I don't know which side I'm looking. Ah, okay. So this is for negative side. Okay, this is for positive side. So if you see in this case, so it is showing that the number of table. So for the probability of values which are below this z. Okay, if your random variable z that you're looking at is less than this z. So the values, what we'll do is like you want to compute probability here. So you'll see and let's say your the z score that we just saw, the z score came something as 0.05 or 0.137 or something like that. So how do you compute it? You have, let's say here 0 0.5. If it's 0.55, so you go from this 0.5 to limit it to this 0.55. So you go from there. So you just like look into the table, map it from where to where. First along the z. Sorry, I guess I cannot point it here. Can I? Cannot. Yeah. So you go along this first z-axis, this part. Okay, yeah, sure. Let's just take a screenshot. See if it works. Yeah, it worked. So if you're looking here, what you do is you first go along this z. Let's say if you want to find something as 0.55, okay? If your if your p came if your z came as 0.55, so now you need to compute the probability of z, which is less than 0.55. Okay, so how do you compute it? You go along the z to zero point 0.5. From this 0.5, you go till this 0.505. So this is your probability. So that's the probability that you have. So you'll write that the probability is equals to this number, 0.7088. Okay. It's like that. This is for Z scores. So for if you even whenever you have Z scores, you do like this. Similarly, for computing T statistics, you have something as this. So now the scores for them are also similar. But for T statistics, it varies in between. So okay, for Z also it varies. So there are like two cases in here. Mm. Whenever you have, so this is like we are going a little bit into it, but okay, it's fine. Okay, so let's say if whenever you have a symmetrical data set, uh, assume it to be symmetric. Okay. Now we'll ask that this is like a two-tailed data set. Okay. You have two tails in this cases. So you are looking at either the differences are or not from both sides. Wherever you'll get cases where you have, let's say like this, only a single tail variation for skewed data sets. Right here, you only have a single tail variation. So in this case, when you have a single scale variation, this is called as skewed. So, or it is called as one paired or one tail. Where in this case, it is called as two tail or it is called as paired. Okay. So accordingly, all of your tables will also change. Now, when you compute that probability, right? So in this case, we just saw that our probability came as what? 0.7, right? Probability of the z less than z came as 0.7. Now this 0.7 is far more greater than 0.05, the critical limit that we define. So whenever we have this case, let's say it is nothing but limited to our, not as like relevant to the hypothesis that we are testing. So our probability came as this. So in this case, this p probability is no longer less than 0.05. So I cannot reject the null hypothesis. So I won't say that my null hypothesis is true. We always say it as cannot reject the null hypothesis. We even won't say that null hypothesis follows. We'll only say that null hypothesis cannot be rejected. So in this case, we follow this, that it cannot be decreased or it won't increase. You cannot say it won't increase also. It's just that it won't reject. Yeah, so you don't know what would happen. You'll only have to see when your sample size increases. Okay. Or the effect of it increases or decreases. So yeah, so if you do not reject, you conclude may be true, but this is like very vague. And in statistics, you never say something like that. But you can always say that your null hypothesis can be rejected. So your alternative hypothesis is true. So that part you can always say, whereas this is, you can never say like that. Okay. Now, in cases is something that now we looked at this probability. Okay. The probability, it is less than that of it because we are always looking the probability which is lesser. We're not looking at the probability which is higher, right? Now, when you look at probability which is higher of it, right? Some things that you missed it off even though your null hypothesis was true, but you again rejected it. So when you rejected it, that is something you produce a error there. So that error is called as type 1 error. Okay. And that error is represented as alpha. So this is nothing but you're rejecting the null hypothesis, even if it's true. So in that case, you'll say that I cannot reject my null hypothesis. That was your best decision, but you never did that because there might be cases. So during my class, my prof gave me an example that, okay, something as a thief is being caught, but the thief was caught to due to an action that he was supposed to, like he was doing an action of a thief, but he was also helping someone else. So now this is a case where you have a paired analysis, you have a binomial distribution. You like you cannot either say that okay, the crime he did was true or not, and the crime he did was false because he was helping someone. So now this is like you have two sides to the coin, right? You cannot deny either one. So that case, well, so cases like those give us errors. So these errors are like type 1 error. There are also some other error, type 2 error, and those we'll see them other time because here he hasn't mentioned, and I do think so that he don't want you to go into that much of stats. So it's fine. Yeah, so these are like the statistics scores. Z-test is always used when you have normal distribution and enough sample size. So if your sample size is large, so that is nothing but greater than 30 equals to 30. So it is used when your population variance is known to you. So entire population here we are talking at, okay? Never think that population can be any chunk of data that you're looking at. Whereas t-test is used when this is small because the sample size is smaller, you cannot give your inference about the population that you're looking at. Okay. So that case, you will say that the population variance is unknown, but the sample variance is known to you. Okay. And then there is something other that is like chi-square test. This test you do to compare categorical data. So it's like data which is like splitted into different terminologies being given to you, and then you're comparing that what you observe, what the ground truth was, how it is being changing with respect to it. Okay. So what I gave you previously, that either you have a critical value, something define it as alpha naught or p naught, And if this your test statistic, let's say either Z or T, if it's higher than that, you reject it. If it's lower than that, you fail to reject it, right? Here also it fails to. It won't say that this cannot be. It's like the it is true. Okay, so we cannot reject it. We won't say that H naught is true. Then if you use a p-value, if your alpha is less than that, the value that you're looking at 0.05, if your p-value is less than that, you say that you have rejected it. If it's higher than that, you say that you failed to reject it. Okay. So these are like the tests that we just saw, and here DF essentially means the degree of freedom. And that comes in handy for big data sets because you never want, if you one point is moved from one set to another set, the order of the data set, if it's changed, you never want to say it as that. Your entire average of the data set, the mean and standard deviation that you're looking at will always change. Okay, so from this is where the term comes. And there was something that Prof gave for estimation of probability distribution. So this is like in it, it's a very big topic. And nowadays it also involves something about machine learning and deep learning. But this is like you estimate the probability distribution when you see a data. It's essentially how he talked about is how to describe a data set. So if you want to look at from basics terms, for now you can understand that if you have larger enough sample size, it can be represented by C score. Either ways can be a T score. And this cases, you can say that it is a normal distribution. It's not, then if it's a T distribution like that. But essentially it's what its meaning is, I can tell you now. So it is the idea behind this is that let's say you have like multiple data points, okay? You have x1 to xn, x2, x3 until xn data points. And then from there, you're computing a probability density function as the PDF of the data that you're looking at. So that's nothing but P of x, right? Now this P of x that you have generated will help you generate the data alone, right? Now, if you have this data points, from this data points, you can get the PDF of it also, and from the PDF, you can get the data points also, right? Either ways, you can sample it. Now, when you do that, simple idea is what you'll do is you'll make a histogram of it, right? You'll define number of bins and everything. And then you define its probability density function, how your distribution looks like, right? Now, this histogram, as what I told you previously, based on the bins, this would be noisy, right? Is dependent on the bin size, that is bin width, what I told, and it is not at all smooth, right? Because it is discrete, does not have enough sample points, right? So instead, what you do is like you use some smoothing methods. And the idea behind those smoothing methods is essentially what Prof talked to us was about the diffusion equation. So from where does a diffusion equation fall in here is, I'll tell you if it was not clear. So now we know that how you represent a Gaussian distribution. So with the mean, let's say x and standard deviation of 0, I can write it as 1 by n of summation of, this is my input function that I'm giving is delta. So delta followed from your Fourier analysis, you know that a delta involves all frequencies. So if I match it to, I'll have a multiple combinations of frequencies, right? A multiple combinations of sines and cosines there. So your delta of x, mean x minus each and every individual function. So this is my direct delta function. When you have that and when you convert it, so this probability that you're looking at is nothing but concentrated at, like you'll use the term exactly what he said also during class, exactly at sample location, right? So when you do that, you have like delta of P of xt, the equation Prof gave us, by dt is equals to your the diffusion constant, del square P by del x square, and then you have like P of x comma t, right? You have this term. So this is your probability which is evolving over time. This is your diffusion function, and this is the smoothing time that you're looking at. Now, the solution, so why did we originally came upon this diffusion equation was because the solution for this, like when you integrate both sides and do everything, and when you estimate a p of x comma t, no, it comes as a Gaussian function. a normal distribution. And from where what we last time looked at gives us a radii of 2 dt. So everything came back, like a whole structure is now formed. So this is like what we studied back time. So this is nothing but a bandwidth. You can either cases I'd call it as width. You can either call it as diameter, either call it as length. Okay, anything. So that's the meaning behind it. So your density estimation is nothing but, so if I write it in terms, your density estimation is equals to your diffusion. So this is some big terms here. Diffusion of probability mass, something which is concentrated and you have to evaluate exact that particular time point or sample point, mass from data point. Right? So you have this case. And then when he mentioned as if it's a steady state. So when you have steady state, it is like it keeps on increasing. So it reaches infinite. In that case, when you differentiate it, that becomes zero. Then if you differentiate the with the spatial partial derivative, that is also zero. So then in this case, your probability becomes constant. So that was the message that he wanted to give. And what he said as to estimate the probability from each discrete data point that you have, each can be modeled as a direct impulse. And by applying the diffusion equation, you can get probability mass which spreads all over time, resulting into a smooth density function. And the solution for this corresponds to convolve the data with a Gaussian kernel. So it's like basically you do a convolution between both of them, which is equal to this kernel density estimation. So this is like a big keyword here. Don't remember it. What is nothing but it's a diffusion state. So that is nothing but it's a diffusion density estimation, nothing but your diffusion of probability mass from entire data points that we'll be looking at. Okay. Any doubts? Was the last part clear and also the hypothesis part?
Yeah.
So, okay. Now, if this all is clear, we'll quickly go through the assignment. Hmm. Okay, do think so that this week's question would be more of calculative basis, but it's fine. Let's see. So this is imagine that you're measuring area of 5 cells that you could see under microscope. Okay. I don't think so if you can ever do this. Measure the area of the cells under microscope. Instead, you'll have to use some software as image. Okay. And you get some measurements there 10, 20, 10, 40, 20. Those have a unit of, let's say, micrometer square. What would be the standard deviation? So you know the formula for standard deviation now, right? Standard deviation is nothing but square root of xi minus mean whole square divided by n minus 1, right? So you compute it, you'll have the answer for it, right? So you can compute the standard deviation here as 10 plus 20 plus 10 plus 40 plus 20 by 5. Right, so sum of all x's I equals to 1 to 5. You can compute that. In this case, what it would be 30, 40, 80, 100, 100 by 5, 20. And then you do this particular time. So you'll get a standard deviation there. Okay. Answer here is 12.25. Next one. Consider many three base pair long single stranded DNA pieces. Each of this piece has one adenine, one cysteine, one guanine. Assuming uniform distribution, what is the probability of finding a DNA piece with a sequence GAC? I've never seen question like this. Okay, so how many What do you say? How many combinations can you get here if you have like A, G, and C here? How many combinations can you form? Any ideas?
No, I remember doing this before, but I don't remember.
Okay. So when you have, let's say, okay. Yeah, so they are telling us that probability of finding a DNA piece with a sequence of this GAC. So we should directly get this GAC there. So how many combinations we'll get is you have three base pairs. So that's always n factorial. So you have 3 times 2 times 1. So that's 6. Okay, so you'll get like six combinations for this G, A, and C. So you can fill that many pairs here, right? You have three numbers. So for the first one, you have three, then second one would be two, right? It shouldn't repeat again, and then it would be one. So this is like six. Now the probability that it should exactly be GAC, and now we saw that okay, it shouldn't repeat itself. So it would be nothing but 1/6. Okay, so like if you have to write something, let's say first can be AGC as what is typically, then it can be GAC, then it can be CGA, okay, then it can be something as ACG, then it can be like GCA perhaps, and then it can be something as CAG. Okay, so we have like GAC and then all other, so 1 by total that is 6. Okay, then 1/6. Microtubules are long biopolymers. Hey, where is he coming with these questions? Okay. And they display a phenomenon known as dynamic instability, where the length of each polymer filament fluctuates widely. Okay. The fluctuation in length is so large that standard deviation is equal to, okay, let's write it, that standard deviation is equal to the average length of the microtubule. Wow. Now, standard deviation itself became equal to it. If this is the case, which of the following is likely to be the resulting distribution of the length of the microtubule filaments? So, yes, ma'am. Okay. So you have your standard deviation equals to the average. So in this case, which distribution would be binomial? We didn't look at Poisson's distribution or normal distribution. So yeah, it would be normal distribution. Why so? Because you represent a normal 200. Okay. So you have this one, and how you represent your Gaussian as that this is zero and standard deviation is essentially at zero axis when you're looking at. So in this case, both are same, right? When you have a normally distributed data set. So this would be a normal distribution. It is actually one because you're looking at from this to this span, but here you don't have any standard deviation. Okay, so that case it is same. Okay. Imagine many proteins, I don't bound along DNA. Let X be the distance between any two proteins. Okay. And your probability is given as this of the distances in between the proteins. Here, K is a positive constant having a dimension of inverse of length that we just saw. And that probability we saw, right? We saw something as if minus infinity to infinity is given and probability of x dx is given. So that would be 1. So your probability will have a unit of what? 1 by length. So that is what they are saying here, that this is inverse of length. Evaluate the following integral and compute the mean distance in between the protein. Between any two protein. The following integral and compute the mean distance between any two protein. Hmm. Do we need to solve it? Because what they want is a probability, right? And we know from here that this should be finite. Now, if it should be finite and we are looking at a finite distance, so this would be inverse of the distance length there. So if it's a finite distance length that we are looking at, so it would be here, right? This k. So it would be nothing but 1 by k, right? Yes. Is this understood? I don't know if we evaluate the integral, what will come. It is xk. So k will essentially go out 0 to infinity. And then you have x exponential of minus kx, px. And then you'll have to follow eyelet here. Try solving this. I don't know what comes after that. I don't even know if it would come as 1 by k square or something. But yeah, if you follow this logic, so it's finite, right? And you know, when it's finite, this has an inverse of length. So that's what they also told us. And this exponential follows k here. So it's nothing but 1 by k, inverse of k. Okay. Imagine that you're part of a group of students. In the group, each of you are doing a properly designed survey asking 1600 adults from a city to tell you their recent hemoglobin count. Okay. Each one of you find the mean of the 1600 values you got. Each one of you find the mean. Okay. The distribution of the mean can be approximated as which distribution? Distribution of means is what? Which distribution? It follows the central limit theorem, and that is which distribution? Normal distribution, right? It's normal distribution. Okay. And the survey mentioned above, one of the person doing the survey got the mean to be this. So you have mean, you have sigma. What will be the standard? Sorry, what they're saying? You have mean, you have sigma. What will be the standard deviation of the distribution of means? Hmm, interesting. Any ideas for this one? So how do you write standard deviation when you compute z score or t score? Someone just came in. So how do you write it? It's in the denominator, right? So denominator term is always s by square root of n. So that's your standard deviation because you are essentially representing either the entire population or the entire sample that you're looking at. Okay. So in this case, your the sample size was like 1600, right? So this is 1600. The mean is just given you to confuse you from there. So this would be standard deviation 4 by square root of 1600. So this is nothing but 40 square, right? And this is 4 by 40, 1 by 10.1. Okay. Yes. Imagine that you're injecting a newly discovered drug to a batch of 10 mice, poor mice. One day after the injection, you're only noting down whether each is dead or alive. If you want to compute the probability that either 3 out of those mice are alive, so what do? You choose 3 mice from the whole set of 10 mice, right? Or it's something as from 10 sets, you choose 3. It's something like that. How do you represent it? Hmm, let me see, let me see. I forgot how do you write it. Hmm, combination. Yeah. So your entire size is up. You write it like this. From 10, so n c k, right? So from 10, you choose 3. So which distribution will be used here?
Binomial distribution.
Yes, that's binomial. Okay. Now the standard deviation of a sample of 100 observations equals 64. The variance of the sample equals what? What would be the variance here? Hmm. So
4096.
sorry?
4096.
Yeah, yes. So always don't get into the extra numbers that are given to you. Just follow what you know. So here it's directly the square of it. 100 has nothing to do in this case. Okay. What other options do we have? This one. In the normal distribution, what's the probability of finding z over 1 or above is given by what? So we want to find a value of z as 1 or above. So just look at the limits here.
Will it be the first option? 1 to infinity.
Yes. Yes. So 1 to infinity. Okay. This case is something I don't think so he gave, but I guess he told us. So if you measure the full width of a normal distribution at 50%, so at 50% is nothing but half maxima, right? And half maxima, you're measuring the full width is nothing but full width, half maxima, right? Half maxima, you get something as here certain that this is equals to 2 square root of 2 ln 2. I don't know why it writes like this. He can either write it as 2 sigma and square root of 2 ln 2, right? Yeah. If the full width at full width at m% of the maximum value is sigma, full width at m%. So you have full width at m% of the maximum is sigma of the maximum. The value of m% is what? Full width at this percent. So I guess we'll have to compute. So let's say if you write as a distribution being given to you, let's say any such distribution as a e power minus hmm, um, by x minus x naught whole square by 2 sigma square, right? And then your A was given to you. So this is like full width half maxima. Should we write it as A or should we change it? Let's write it as A. And then they are saying 50% of the maximum, we get this. Full width half maxima is given to you. But that we already know that when it would be A by 2, you have the answer to it. Now we need to compute the value of it if full width at m% of the maximum is sigma. Okay, the full width at m%. So m% is essentially uh, m by 100, right? M by 100 of your entire amplitude that you're looking at. I don't know if we should do it this way or not. Uh, and then, so the question is at m%, the value of m% is. Hmm. Then he's saying full width at m%. So full, what was our formula for full width? Let's see. Why did we do it? Full width was something as sigma is equals to W by square root of, oh, so 8 is nothing but 2 into ln 2, right? So this is this, and this is full width. This has nothing to do with mu. And since they are seeing as a normal distribution, I don't know what should we substitute mu as in this case. Hmm. Okay, let's just see.
Can we take x minus x naught as w by 2?
Yeah. You can yeah, exactly. So if you do something as x minus x naught, that's whole squared. Now then you'll need a 2 added there, right? Oh yeah. So if you're saying like this, Was x minus x not the entire width or width by half? That was half width, right? Yeah, if we are able to add in this term there, then we can utilize this there. We right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, if we directly add it as width, let's see. Answer is something as 88.25. We don't know. Let's see. So if we write it as square it 2, then sorry, this is 4. 4 to the 8. 8 sigma square, and then you have ln 2. By you have 2 sigma square. Sigma square cancel. This is like 4. This is exponential minus times a you have, and here you have a. So let's cancel a, and this is m by 100. You want to compute percent of m, so that is essentially m by 100 that we're looking at. Hmm. Now this can be written as ln 2 by 4. Hmm. I don't think so. So I guess this was half. Let's see the notes. I forgot it. What was our width? We assigned x minus x. Yeah, so this is x minus x naught is not the full width. That is half width. Okay. So since we are equating to its half width, but we have the formula for the full width at n, um, we'll have to what divide it. This is way too confusing for me. Let's do it from scratch again. Okay. So this would be like m by 100. We don't have to do any changes here. E raised to minus 1 by 2 sigma square. Okay. Now this is half width given. We have half width here. So full width would be 2 times of this 2, this, and this, right? And square of it. Okay. So this would be 1 minus this. And then you have 4. And then you have 4 to the 8. Wait, are we doing the same thing again? Oh, I didn't write an extra 2 here this time. Yeah, 2 to the 4. 4 square 16. 16 to the. Why it is like this? This is right. 8 ln 2 sigma, right? The square of this term, sigma square. When you square this, you get. Like, when you multiply by 2, you get 8 to the 16. And times 2 also, because 2 square also. So you have 32, right? 32 ln 2 sigma square. Okay, then you have like 16 here, and then you have minus 1 by sigma square. Okay, so our sigma is also cancelled now. Minus, you don't have this, you have 16 ln 2, right? You can represent it as, take it inside. If we take it inside, it would be a Marcus here. 2 raised to 16. And then you can change the basis here. But you still have a minus sign here. So this will go inside also. No, minus won't go. So you can write it as 1 by log of. Okay, split the limits there. Are we doing something wrong here? The solution key is too vague to follow in this case. Hmm.
I think I got the answer.
How did you do?
Um, well, I took that formula that we took m by 100 into a is equal to a to e to the power that I substituted
Hmm.
x minus x naught or x minus mu as w by 2,
Yes, half
and
width, huh?
yeah, and then I took log on both sides. then they've given the W at m% is sigma. So I
Huh.
substituted that. If
Hmm.
I do that, then I can cancel sigma square and sigma square.
Yeah. Hmm.
Below we'll get 8. So on
Hmm.
this side, if
Oh,
we
achha.
take ln, we'll get ln m minus ln 100. And if we, I mean, on LHS, we have ln m. On RHS,
Hmm.
we'll have ln 100 minus 1 by 8.
Okay.
So then m will then be e to the power ln 100 minus
1
1
by
by 8
100.
and got
Huh.
88.249.
Hmm. Okay. Makes sense. This is minus, right? Or this one too? Where is minus sign?
Um,
Right?
Minus, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Here, here. Okay. Glad you got it. Okay.
But why have they given the 2 root 2 ln 2?
Yeah. So this was like what we were trying to do here. That was smart of you to write it as W. They gave it as an entire bit.
Oh, right, right. Okay, okay.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Okay, then that's done. If you have any further questions, you can let me know. I guess till this point, you know better how to solve these questions than me. So then we are
It's a
done
bit
here for the.
confusing.
Yeah, yeah, it was actually. I was like in a point that I solved this and I forgot what came.
No, I think you came to the same conclusion, but sorry, I didn't
I
see.
was not getting. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Okay, then I guess you're Shweta, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Shweta, then. If you have any further questions, let me know. And this is
Yeah.
last class then. See you next time.
Uh, Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye bye. Thanks for helping for this one.
Oh, bye.
Bye.